Hello. I will be doing readings of Reddit posts from Tales from the Creep. I'm just doing an order of post, starting with my own story and then moving on to the latest post. Let's see, let's refresh. And we have one that was posted 6 minutes ago. The lightning bugs won't stop getting brighter. Psychological horror. And it's it's not too bad. Not too bad at all. All right, let's see what's it about. The lightning bugs won't stop getting brighter. I know most people who aren't from the South dream about seeing a field lit up with lightning bugs running through the grass, cupping little flickers of lights in their hands. I used to love it too, until they started getting brighter. It began as innocently as you'd expect. My little sister and I ran around the backyard trying to catch them. I was 16 and convinced I was too old for it, even though I was having just as much fun as she was. My mom and dad sat on the swing watching us, laughing and taking pictures. We only went inside once it got too dark. I always whistled when it was time to come in. Every time I heard that whistle, I'd think about the scary stories our uncle used to tell us when our parents weren't around. About the whistler? Is that a reference? Looking back, that was the last normal night we ever had. Ooh. I like that, the classic. Over the next few weeks, Mom and Dad started arguing more and more. They always try to keep their voices down, but they were terrible at it. They kept arguing about whether to let us stay outside past 8, since dusk didn't settle until around 9. But no matter how heated the argument got, they always agreed on one thing. Nobody was to leave the house after dark. At least what we used to call dark. The news says they're just a different kind of lightning bug, some generic mutation or something. Since when has the news ever been honest with anybody? Mom shot back, pointing at the newspaper they'd stopped letting us read weeks ago. What is going on in this house? Every evening, the argument started around sunset, except the sun was setting. It just never seemed to get fully dark. Except when the sun was setting, it just never seemed to get fully dark anymore. I'm not sure. Then a few weeks later, my little sister came running into the kitchen in the middle of one of their usual arguments. She was crying so hard she could barely get her words out. It's still light out. I want to go play. The second my sister started crying, Mom and Dad forgot all about arguing. We can't right now. The sun's been acting real weird, and it doesn't want people outside later in the day, Dad said, trying to brush off his mistake. I'll tell you what, Mom said, kneeling beside her. If you go to your room right now, I'll come play queen and princess with you in a couple of minutes. My sister was a little different. Most girls wanted to be the queen so they could boss the princess around. What? What little girl? What do you mean most little girls wanted to be the queen? What on earth is a little girl? There's princess dolls, there's princess costumes. The queen? What do you mean? What? Shouldn't this be the opposite? Maybe I don't know. I feel like you'd do something with your little sister wanting to be a queen instead of a princess like a normal girl. This line's kind of weird. She always wanted to be a princess. She's a really weird girl. She's not like the other girls. She likes pink and she likes to be a princess. And she also has a unicorn doll. She's super strange. We watched her disappear into the hallway. Sorry, I'll just reread that line. My little sister was a little different than most little girls. She wanted to be the queen. Sorry. See, I corrected the line. My little sister was a little different. Most little girls wanted to be the queen so they could boss their princess around. My little sister was a little different. Most little girls wanted to be the queen so they could boss the princess around. She always wanted to be the princess. We watched her disappear into the hallway. The moment she was gone, so were my parents' smiles. "What is going on?" I said angrily. For the first time since all of this started, they didn't brush me off. My mom looked at my dad and said, "She's old enough to handle it." Oh, sorry. "She's old enough to handle it." My dad looked displeased, but asked me, What do you know?" While my only sources of information were my friends at school and the wind-up radio in my room, I still tried to act like I knew everything. "The days aren't ending," I said confidently. Mom and Dad exchanged a tired look before they both sighed. "We don't really know what's going on," Dad admitted. "They're saying the lightning bugs have some kind of mutation that's making them brighter." Mom nodded. "They're breeding faster than normal. They used to spend about 2 years underground before coming out. Now they're saying it's only taking 2 weeks." "Okay, so why does that mean we can't go outside? My friends who have phones says it's the government trying to kill us." What? What is happening? "It seems like your friends have about as much sense as a screen door on a submarine." Mom snapped. The anger left her face almost as quickly as it came. "Your friends make about as much sense as a screen door being on a submarine? But it makes sense versus have about as much sense." I think it just needs to just be rewritten a little bit. But I like the classic Southern. The anger left her face almost as quickly as it had come. "We don't even know what's happening," she said quietly. "And honestly, it's scaring us too. The quilts over the windows, the aluminum foil just in case it's too much." I didn't know what to say. I just wrapped my arms around my mom. She was on the verge of crying. Dad stepped in a moment later. For a few seconds, the three of us just stood there. As the days passed, not only did light stop coming, the days somehow grew even brighter. School started earlier and only lasted a couple hours. Mom and Dad were home more often than they were at work. Rolls upon rolls of aluminum foil covered our kitchen table, half used, while quilts slowly disappeared from the linen closet and ended up over the windows. Weeks turned into months. Somewhere in the middle of it all, I turned 17. Nobody celebrated. I didn't even remember if anyone said happy birthday. The house scratched that. Everything was scorching. My little sister complained nonstop. The heat was bad enough, but she really hated... My little sister complained nonstop. The heat was bad enough, but what she really hated was never getting to see her friends from school anymore. Trying to sleep became miserable. We'd lie on our bare mattresses, leaving sweat marks on them because even a sheet was too hot to sleep under. I knew it had took a turn for the worse when my dad, who was very against technology and social media, came home with a ham radio and laptop. With the heat getting to me and my confusion, I said, "What the heck is this?" Both Mom and Dad looked at me with utter disgust. "How about we watch our mouth, or we're gonna wash it with some soap," Mom said. Then They both realized that they were saying that to their 17-year-old daughter and dropped the shock and disgust. It's getting worse, Dad said. The light, the heat. So I'm guessing... I'm thinking they're coming on. They've become... I think the reason that line is in there is to show that the family is under pressure and like the heat is getting to them. Because if the main character is confused, and I'm going to say the family is too. And that's why this kind of strange exchange happened. I'm changing the dad's voice. It's getting worse, Dad said. The heat from the light, water lines drying up, government saying they have everything under control, that we just need to adapt. He looked around the kitchen at the quilts hanging over the windows and rolls of aluminum foil covering the table. So we're adapting. Mom and Dad showed me how to use the ham radio once they got it set up. Dad spent hours talking with the neighbors, and whenever he or Mom needed a break, I'd take over and relay whatever the government's broadcasting. Mom and Dad showed me how to use the ham radio. Once they got it set up, Dad spent hours talking with the neighbors, and whenever he or Mom needed a break, I'd take over and relay whatever the government's broadcasts were saying. So who has a ham radio but isn't able to get the government broadcasts? Doesn't matter. The laptop was different. They wouldn't even let me look at the screen. More months slipped by. Hey Siri, start a voice memo. The heat never got any easier to live with. If anything, it got worse. The water stopped running some days, then came back as nothing more than a trickle. Every week, another window disappeared behind another quilt or another layer of aluminum foil. The government kept repeating the same message over the radio. Stay calm. Adapt. Eventually, it all started feeling normal. My little sister stopped asking when she could go outside again. She stopped asking about her friends. Kids have a strange way of adapting to the world they're given. Before long, she hardly remembered what her life had been like before the neighbors stopped getting dark. She stopped asking about her friends. Before long, she hardly remembered what life she had. Before long, she hardly remembered what life had been like before the night stopped getting dark. I wasn't so lucky. Every morning, I woke up drenched in sweat. Every night, the light pouring around the edges of the quilt reminded me of something outside that wasn't right. I caught myself staring through the smallest gaps in the foil, wondering if I'd ever see real night again. Somewhere along the way, I turned 18. Mom wished me a happy birthday over canned peaches instead of a cake. Dad apologized for not having a present. I told them it didn't matter. It did. It didn't matter to you last time. Why did it matter this time? By then, the ham radio had become the heartbeat of that. By then, the ham radio had become the heartbeat of our house. It crackled from the moment Dad woke up until long after we went to bed. Neighbors traded rumors. Government broadcasts repeated the same reassurance that they've been giving for months. Then one morning, it was silent. In its place came something worse. A slow, steady hum drifted in through the quilts covering the windows. It wasn't loud, if anything. It was almost comforting, until you realized it never stopped. We stuffed cotton balls in our ears and muffled the humming just enough to make it bearable. My sister never understood there was such a thing as too far. More than once, Mom had to dig a cotton ball back out of her ear, with a pair of tweezers, while she cried and promised she'd never do it again. She always did. The humming only got louder. We changed the cotton balls every day, but it got to the point where having them in felt more normal than taking them out. The light, now accompanied by the constant humming, slowly drove us all a little crazy. Did that have to be said out loud? Mom and Dad lost what little patience they had left. My little sister grew bitter, saying things like, "Maybe they aren't bad. Maybe we're the bad ones." After me, I snapped at everyone, sometimes for no reason at all. Every now and then, we'd have a good day. We'd laugh, eat dinner together, and almost convince ourselves things were going to be okay. Then we'd remember the light, the humming, and those good days became fewer and farther between. Then one day, a voice came through the radio. It was faint, muffled, and buried beneath static, but it was unmistakably a person's voice. All of us rushed over, even my little sister. Dad grabbed the microphone. "Hello? Hello? Who's there? Hello? Hello? Who's there?" Nothing. The voice came back, but it was nothing more than a jumble of words none of us could make out. We stood there, listening for what felt like forever, hoping it would become clearer. It never did. Eventually, we drifted away from the radio, more disappointed than before. Mom and Dad disappeared into their room. A few seconds later, I heard the laptop snap shut. I couldn't sleep that night. Every few minutes, I'd have to peel myself off the sweat-soaked mattress just to roll over, wiping the sweat from my eyeballs before it could sting. That's when the radio crackled to life again. I waited for Dad to come sprinting out of his room. He didn't. I glanced over my little sister. She was sound asleep. Slowly, I walked over to the radio. The voice was louder this time, clearer. It sounded like a man. Not old, but definitely not a kid. "Hello? Is anyone there? Please, hello?" My hands were shaking as I picked up the trucker's microphone and pressed the button on the side. Hello? I wasn't even sure this was real. My eyes burned, bloodshot from the heat. Was that needed? My eyes burned, bloodshot from the heat and the months of the restless nights. Then I heard him again. "Oh my... There's actually someone..." He paused. "Who are you? Or are you with the government?" I had to think about that for a second. Would the government really answer with hello? There was a pause before he replied. Maybe. How am I supposed? Maybe. How am I supposed to know? I laughed. It caught me off guard. It was the first real laugh I had in months. That one awkward joke turned into hours of talking. Oh man, she's gonna run out into the night to meet this guy. His name was Riley. He was 19. He told me his parents had slowly lost their minds before walking outside one day, and he never saw them again. I told him about my family, the light, the humming, the quilts, the cotton stuffed in our ears. It was strange. Talking to someone who wasn't family felt almost normal. Talking to a boy my age felt even stranger. I'd forgotten what it was like. Then I heard my dad's bedroom door open. His footsteps came fast, making a beeline for the radio. The second he stepped into the room, the voice dissolved back into the same useless jumble of static and garbled words we'd been hearing for months. I couldn't explain why, but I suddenly felt like I'd been caught doing something wrong. "Were you talking to someone?" Dad asked. I hesitated. No. I looked back at the radio. It's just been doing this. I was just saying hello to see if anybody would answer. Dad stared at me for another second before turning his attention back to the radio. I got it from here. Get some rest. I got it from here. Get some rest. You look like you haven't slept in a while. I did exactly that.
I think it'd be interesting since they're all going crazy.
If there was some sort of mention about the dad stare lingering longer than normal. Just a thought I had. Not really critique, just something I'm thinking about. I did exactly that. Before long, it became our routine. Mom and Dad would fall asleep, and I'd quietly slip out of my bed to meet Riley on the radio. We talked for hours. I'm really enjoying this kind of Riley situation. It's going to lead to her, like, exploding out of the house or something. I'm liking a lot. We talked for hours. At first, it was just about surviving. Then it became everything else. The friends we missed, the lives we thought we'd have, what we'd be doing if the world hadn't fallen apart. At that point, the idea what 18 and 19-year-olds were supposed to be doing came from the movies we could barely remember. He became my best friend without either of us ever saying it. As weeks passed, the cracks in my family only grew wider. Oh, we don't even know the main character's name. I was going to say, Riley's talking to the static again. Mom and Dad spent more and more time locked in their rooms with the laptop. My little sister would sit for hours staring at the thin silver light that squeezed through the smallest gaps in the quilts. Sometimes she'd smile at it. That scared me more than anything. The only conversation that still made sense were the ones I had with Riley. That lasted until one day, they all seemed to break. Mom and Dad spent hours repeating things they'd supposedly read online. They said the light wasn't hurting us. We're the problem. That's what the little girl was saying. We're the problem, Dad insisted. Our bodies just weren't made for it. We're the ones who have to change, Mom added quietly. My little sister took it even further. We're not allowed in the light, she said, staring at the thin strip of brightness peeking through the quilts. Not yet, she smiled. But if we change with it, she looked back at me, then we'll deserve it. The first thing they did was take the cotton balls out of their ears. They just sat there, letting the humming fill the room like it was the most natural sound in the world. I begged them to put them back in. They wouldn't. It was like they weren't even listening to me anymore. Only the humming. I told Riley everything that night.
Hoping he'd tell me I wasn't crazy. I told Riley everything that night. Hoping.
I told Riley everything that night, hoping he'd tell me I wasn't crazy. He didn't. He didn't encourage it, but he didn't think it sounded as insane as I did. They might just be adapting, he said carefully. That answer scared me almost as much as my family did. I kept hoping they'd reach the limit of how crazy they'd get. And crazy doesn't have a limit. They hadn't. Little by little, they started tearing quilts off the windows, then the aluminum foil. Every time I managed to hang one back up, all three of them would claw it down. Eventually, they unlocked the front door and threw everything outside. For the first time in over a year, a light poured straight into the house. Light poured straight into the house when they tore down the quilt and the aluminum foil. It was unbearable. The heat grew so intense that the cable connecting the trucker's microphone to the radio began to soften and melt. I barely noticed. I couldn't stop staring at them. They came back inside. Their eyes were wrong. The irises had turned a dull gray, while the centers looked as if the black pupils had melted into them. They didn't seem to notice, or maybe they didn't care. They spent the rest of the day talking about the lightning bugs. No, not lightning bugs. Evolved beings, Dad corrected me. They're evolved beings, my little sister repeated with the same certainty. I wasn't even sure she knew what evolved meant. He kept trying to convince me, and it became harder and harder to talk to Riley as the cable connecting the microphone to the radio slowly softened from the heat, stretching a little more every day. It finally boiled over. They completely ignored me. They didn't even acknowledge that there was another person in the room. Mom stood beside my little sister in front of my dad. A spoon, a screwdriver, lay neatly on the table beside him. Oh no. Oh no. I do not like where this is going. A spoon and a screwdriver laid neatly on the table beside him. I stood there frozen. He picked up the spoon and instantly forced it into my mom's eye, popping the socket clean out and leaving a blank crater. She screamed, a waterfall of blood pouring down her face, and she remained stiff, standing tall. Then he grabbed a screwdriver and slammed it deep into her ears. Blood rushed out, meeting the crimson tracks on her chin. The moment he turned towards my sister, I ran at him with every ounce of my being. He only got one eye. Next thing I know, I'm waking up. The house was even brighter. My hands flew to my face, my eyes, then my ears. No blood. I could hear a mixture of crying and laughing. It was too bright to make out their faces, but I could see the outline of my family standing just outside the door, hand in hand. I screamed and begged them to come back inside. They never looked at me. Their laughter and crying drowned everything else out. I ran to the last comfort I had left. Riley. I grabbed the trucker's microphone. It was white hot in my hand. The plastic began to soften from the heat. I told him everything, not because I thought he'd have a solution. I just needed someone to tell me I wasn't alone. And all I got back was, they are evolving. You should too. Oh, no, not Riley. His voice slowly blended into the endless humming until I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Something inside me broke. I slammed the radio onto the floor. Plastic casing shattered, already half melted from the heat. If Riley couldn't give me answers, maybe the laptop could. Ooh, coming full circle to the laptop that was mentioned. I opened it. The only thing on the screen was a folder full of videos, one for every day. I clicked the first one, then another. Every single one of them, the same. Mom, Dad, my little sister, kneeling silently in front of the thin strip of light leaking through the quilts and aluminum foil. My little sister, kneeling silently in front of the strip of light leaking through the quilts. Each day, they stayed there a little longer. Each day, they moved a little closer. Each day, they smiled a little more. If you're reading this, stay away from the light. I don't know how much longer I can. Yeah, I mean, overall, I like the story a lot. Yeah, no, I had like little critiques here, but I like the story a lot. Okay, so the sun is setting. Okay, so that's fine. It's about lightning bugs, and they're getting brighter and brighter. So even though the sun is coming up and going down, it doesn't make any difference, because it's like if somebody's turning on a floodlight and you turn on your little keychain flashlight, right? That's the extent it's getting to. Yeah, except the sun around sunset, except the sun was setting. Except the sun wasn't setting, it just never seemed to get fully dark. This sentence I don't understand. Every evening the argument started around sunset, except the sun was setting. It just never seemed to get fully dark. Because even if you say every evening the argument started around sunset, except the sun wasn't setting, it just never seemed to get fully dark. I don't understand. As the days pass, so did the brightness outside. So they're blaming it on it's never really clear. Like, it never really goes like the lightning bugs are getting brighter. That's just kind of what is told. But overall, yeah, this was a great read. Yeah. So overall, definitely check out what is their name? The Mean Elk. They have Horror Writer. If you want more of my stories or longer versions, let me know here or on X. So there you go. Great story. Just got done reading it. I'm just confused about this one line. I'm just convinced. Confused. All right, the next story we'll be reading is RNG. No, we're not doing that. What does RNG mean? I'm just gonna read this one instead. How long is this one? Oh, nice and short. Okay, cool. Okay, yeah, the title of this one caught me pretty good. The story is by The Full Dog. By The Full Dog. A interesting looking little fella there. They don't have any fun descriptors like the other one did. User flare. Critic. Proofreader. Book talk. Gross. Retired fanfic writer. It's a good thing you're retired. Storyteller. 1,000 work in progresses. Okay. Poet. Scribe. Pen pusher. Author, critic, writer, reader. Just writer, okay? We'll just do that. Oh my goodness. Ugh. Sci-fi horror. We sent 4 people through time. They never came back. Oh. It was summer. I recall that much. Not a cloud in the sky as families lined up across every road in the near vicinity of the launch site. The faces of brave volunteers who were projected on the huge screens dotted about the desert and broadcasted to the entire world. The faces of brave volunteers were projected on huge screens dotted about the desert and broadcast to the entire world. I remember the way they smiled as they waved to the crowd and entered the capsule. I wondered if any of us really knew what was going on back then. If happiness of exploration and a new frontier was really just a thin veneer over an ever-present anxiety of what the heck might happen. If this all went wrong, after all, It wasn't just space we were playing with now. It was time. Harder to understand, but so much easier to break. Okay. If you say so. They had already sent atoms back, then microbes, then small inanimate objects. None of it made headlines. Even the local news was bored of it after a while. But this was supposed to be the event that launched us into the new age. Yeah, so a local MIT student sent a pair back in time or forward in time. Ugh. Who cares? Time travel? Who cares? Why? Why do they not care? And I'm assuming we're going to get to the point where they send a dog or a monkey before they just shove a guy in there. The countdown began. Nope, apparently not. These are the first living creatures other than microbes to be sent. The countdown began. And again, I'm not critiquing the writing per se. I'm critiquing the scientist. The countdown began. The crowd joined it in as thousand. The countdown began. The crowd joined in as 1,000 voices called out. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then nothing. Just the desert breeze, a billion eyes, and an empty space. They were meant to be gone for only a second. That's what we were told. There and back in the blink of an eye. But after a lot of noise and a bright light, there was none there to be seen. Doesn't matter. Not gonna get into it. They'd gone. Oh no. After a lot of noise and a bright light, there was no but after a lot of noise and a blinding light, there was no one there to be seen. They'd be gone. They'd gone. I think it's just they gone. They're gone. They didn't come back. We must have all stood there for hours, assuming it would be fixed in a matter of minutes. But as I drove home that day, the sun slowly setting over the sand, I knew deep down this wouldn't be the end. How stupid we were. As much as I tried to ignore it, I knew the world was about to change. I just didn't know how badly it would change. Why do they have a giant... I don't understand. Why was there a launch site for a time machine? Like it's a space shuttle. Doesn't matter. You know, maybe there's just a bunch of like time dust that flies out everywhere. You know, like why did it have to be outdoors? Why couldn't it be done inside? I don't know. I've always seen time travel more like in a lab, so I guess they're doing something interesting. I thought they were going to be like launched into space and then it would be like Back to the Future. I don't know. It was almost a month later, and like most catastrophes catastrophic events, most catastrophics, like most catastrophes. Wow. It was almost a month later, like most catastrophes. It was almost a month later, like most catastrophes. It was almost a month later, like most catastrophes. It was almost a month later, like most catastrophes. It was almost a month later, like most catastrophes. It had all be. It was almost a month later, like most catastrophes. It had all been forgotten about the. It was almost a month later, like most catastrophes. It had all been forgotten about by the mainstream news outlets, overtaken by weekly military strikes or political scandals. But I think we all still felt the pit in our stomachs, even if we tried not to talk about it. But us scientists, but the people who worked on the project still felt the pit in our stomachs, even if we tried not to talk about it. Of course, they were talking about. Of course, there was talks. Of course, there was talk about trying to get them back. But the thing is, they didn't know for sure if they had even made it to their destination. How would you? Maybe they vaporized on impact? What? So it is a flying ship? Or just disappeared from reality entirely? This was the line the United States government took. What? This was the line? This was the logic the United States government took? It was a waste of money sending 4 more willing participants back to their near certain deaths to rescue people who were now nothing but an atomic mist in the 4 corners of yesterday? I'm going to reread that line because I felt like that line was meant to be like a really good line. And I think I like the way that reads. So I'm going to reread that because I think it deserves a little more justice. It was a waste of money sending 4 more willing participants back to their near certain deaths to rescue people who were now nothing but an atomic mist in the 4 corners of yesterday. How could they justify more lives, they asked. And we all ate it up. Perhaps because we knew meddling any further may not have been the best idea. So we did what we always do and left them. What? We do what we always do. We left them. Who is we? And who have you left before? Okay. Trying to forget had ever happened. It was the 2nd month that things began to unwind. We didn't know it then, but we'd begun to forget things here and there, get confused in places we didn't recognize. But the thing is, none of us attributed it to that event. I certainly didn't. As far as I was concerned, I was just tired and confused. Okay. I had no reason to believe everyone else had the same problem as me. I remember around this time, a man at work went home one day and never returned. No one seemed to mind. Most seemed to not have known him. Strange, I thought. He seemed to be so popular, but didn't appear to have made an impact in any way. Those who did remember his name struggled to recall his face. And in truth, even I couldn't quite make it out, being the only one who seemed to have an ounce of concern for the well-being of this man. I found the phone number he left with HR as an emergency contact, his wife. HR just handed it over. But after a long night debating with myself, I couldn't find the confidence to call her. So I simply left it there. A scrunched up piece of paper on the coffee table. I'd say it was 2 weeks after that when I found a man walking alone down the street whilst I was outside watering the flowers. I don't usually talk to random people, but this man seemed lost somehow. I know that maybe he was new in town, so I wandered over and introduced myself. He began rambling semi-incoherently, But from what I could pick up, it seemed that he walked home every day after work. But 3 days prior, he walked back to find nothing but a half-empty lot. Just dirt, overgrown shrubs, and a rusty swing set in the corner. A half-empty lot? He walked home to find nothing but an empty lot. Just dirt, overgrown shrubs, and a rusty swing set in the corner. His house hadn't vanished. It simply had never existed. He said he took a look at his keys to find they didn't look the way he remembered. They looked newer. So he had a house. He just didn't know where it was. Oh, that's... I don't know. As you can imagine, I found it hard to believe a house could just vanish. But clearly upset, I let him continue without interruption. He said he had taken to walking the streets, hoping that one building might seem familiar and the key might fit. It was sad to think of this poor man walking up and down this It was sad to think of this poor man walking up and down, lost and alone, looking for a house he didn't know. I'd have invited him in, but he was keen to get moving. It was only as he turned to leave that he brought up the family he'd left inside. Were they gone? I don't know. It seemed he didn't either. What the heck is happening? That night, I decided to call the number of the man who worked. That night, I decided to call the number of the work colleague. That night, I decided to call the number of the work colleague's wife. Unfortunately, his name escaped me, so as the phone dialed, I thought desperately of what to say. When she picked up, I stuttered my way through through explaining that her husband had been... When she picked up, I stuttered my way through explaining that her husband hadn't been seen at work and that I was just checking he was okay. Just checking if he was okay. The line was silent for a moment. Then a voice spoke. But I'm not married. But you must be. This is a number he gave as his emergency contact, I said, hoping that she'd suddenly remember a man she'd never met. I even read aloud her full name and address. She said that was definitely her name and that it was indeed her address, but no man matching any description but no man matching any description I tried to give had ever lived there, and she definitely had never been married. So it's her name, and it's her address, and it's her phone number, but she's married, so did she not take her husband's last name? And then if an entire house disappears, wouldn't the emergency contact disappear off the records? It wasn't uncommon in the coming days to hear stories like these. Everyone lost someone. Like hikers in the woods, people would simply be there 1 second and gone the next. We'd never find a trace of them. Why? It doesn't matter. Even CCTV cameras wouldn't pick them up. Huh? It was as if the world began swallowing people whole. Their past and futures folded in on themselves, leaving no note or last known whereabouts to their loved ones. Where their loved ones were left to look for the people they've lost as long as they could hold on to the memory of them. The worst part was changing faces. No one looked the way you remembered them. Every day was like meeting everybody for the first time. But in the confusion, it's hard to tell if the faces change or simply the memory of them. I recall a young lady that I'd sworn I'd never met before talking to me for at least half an hour. We stood in the aisle of an empty supermarket. She told me a week prior she checked her bank account to find a lot more money than she'd ever known she had. and she had never been poor, but never rich either. The trouble was that she couldn't work out where it had come from. I wish I had some good explanation for her, but I couldn't work out where I'd seen her before. This threw me for a while and left me somewhat absent from the conversation. It was as she mentioned her feeling as emptiness that I came back to it. It was as she mentioned her feeling of emptiness, I came back to it. We all felt it by then. She said she couldn't understand what she'd lost, why she felt this way. She worked a job even if she had no idea what it was. She had enough money to retire at an early age, but nothing could quite fill the hole left by a lifetime unlived and absent she couldn't contend with. But nothing could quite fill that hole left by a lifetime unlived and absent she couldn't connect with. What? As we said our goodbye, she stepped closer. With a tear in her eye, she kissed me on the cheek. It's his wife. A strange thing for a woman I hardly knew to do, but strangers still felt kind of right. Something in the way that she smelled dislodged a memory too dark to make out. My heart called out, but I stayed quiet as she walked away in tears. I don't know how long it's been. Maybe 6 months. No, that can't be right. Maybe a year. I woke up this morning with a pain in my head like I'd never known. After walking around the halls for what seemed like hours, I finally found my way to the bathroom. In the mirror was a man I'd never met before. His life is one I didn't live. His world spinning too fast, out of control. I wonder if today might be the day the record finally scratches and time will finally run out. Or will we all keep living, slowly spiraling down the place that we never knew we could fall to? We tried to rule time, but time in the end was always going to win. Man. Okay, so, wow. Trying to think of, just trying to think, I don't, it's time travel, right? So, like, time travel, I shouldn't have read a time travel story. That's what it boils down to. Because to me, it always, like, why are people forgetting things? Like, I understand, okay, 4 people went back in time and changed history. Okay, so, okay. See, it all boils down to, like, what theory of time travel do you accept? And I like the idea of, like, if you go back in time, you're changing a new outcome, and you've essentially made 2 timelines. That's what I follow. Clearly, that's not this story. And so what I'm trying to figure out is, like, why... So, like, they changed the future enough that people are forgetting. I think what's happening is, right, they changed the future, but instead of it just all happening at once and, like, people just, like, instantly disappearing, instead it's, like, a slow leech over as the world transforms into the new one. Which is it's interesting. It's definitely a very interesting point. It's definitely a very interesting thought of, like, a time traveler has changed the future, but instead of making a new timeline or things just snapping and changing, because of, like, well, so-and-so wasn't born, so this house wasn't built, and this house wasn't bought by so-and-so, so now so-and-so lives at a different house. Instead of that happening, it's like a slow melt for the present to slowly correct itself into what the new future is and has to be. And yeah, there's just certain lines that are kind of weird. Like, I left my family inside the house. It's kind of weird. It's more like my family was in the house when it disappeared. So some things do just snap out of reality. While your own memory is getting mixed up. It's definitely a very interesting thought. It's definitely a very interesting idea, and I do like it. I like the idea a lot. I think this could be just fleshed out more. I don't know. I definitely like the idea is definitely very interesting. Like I said, that's pretty much it. Just the idea of, instead of time travel having instant changes, it's like just a really like nightmare situation of things slowly, basically course correcting. The only thing, yeah, in the end, time was always going to win. Yeah. So, I really like the concept. I just did a live reaction reading. You can find the recording on cool. I don't really like upvoting my own stuff. I will be doing more readings, and I think what I'd like to do is just do like live readings of people's stories. Like, if you want your story read, just leave a comment and I'll read your story. Just know that I'm just gonna be kind of honest about how I feel. I'm gonna be nice about it, but I'm not. Peace, y'all.